Final Fantasy XIV as a whole begins with the UI and it ends with the UI, just as the journey begins and ends with the player. Hey there, welcome to the video. I'm Dying Legacy and this is a Final Fantasy XIV UI guide. The UI in Final Fantasy XIV is extremely important, and to aid in that, it's extremely flexible. It's also very unique to every player and their needs, and it's very important to remember to set it up and lay it out to your own personal needs, as there's no right or wrong way to do it. But for this guide, I am going to go over my setup and my thinking behind it, and at the end I'll quickly go over these collapsing hotbars. You can help to keep your UI looking minimal. With the intro out of the way, let's get into it. This here is my UI setup. This has been a work in progress from the very moment I started playing Final Fantasy XIV. UIs are unique to each player, and for myself, I like to keep much of the screen free as possible, while also showing as much info as possible. I log a lot of hours a day and at varied times throughout those days, so I like to see the server time, my local time, and Eorzea's time as well, just so I can keep on top of timekeeping. If you want to choose what kinds of times you see, you can head to the character configuration from your system menu. Go to the UI settings and then into the HUD tab as well. Scroll down a bit to the clock type and tick the boxes for times that you want to see. So I have put the clock up in the top corner of my screen where it's viewable but also away from my line of sight, along with my current guild count, inventory and my map. And I have popped my duty list just under that as well. It's all localized to the right corner of my screen so I can glance over when I need to, but it's also not covering or distracting from the rest of my screen. Now, bear in mind when moving everything around that every frame of the UI comes with its own settings, such as transparency, size, even layout setups. You can check those settings out by clicking the cogwheel on the HUD layout menu, plus you can also right click a frame to hide it if you don't want to see or use it. Now, the same thinking follows from my scenario guide for main quests. I have left this completely default because I like its original place and size, so I've just left it as is at the top left corner, as I find that's a good place. Plus, I like to keep up with my job quests as I'm leveling and want to know the moment I unlock one. I could make it smaller, but it's never been an issue as of yet. The experience bar falls under the same premise. I want to keep up to date on my leveling, but I don't need it in my face all the time, so I have put it at the top of my screen, dead center, as it doesn't take up much space and it is quite a thin frame, so it sits nicely at the top out of my way. With all the tidbits out of the way, let's move on to the meat of the UI, the hotbars, targeting frames and the like. Now, the hotbars themselves are the most personal UI frame to each player. I have mine set up in this manner for two specific reasons for me. The first is the layout itself, which I have set to 3x4 and use 4 hotbars for job specific abilities. I do this because I use an MMO mouse that has 12 thumb buttons that are 3x4 as well, so my hotbar mimics my mouse button layout, which is easier for me to press what I need to and makes it easier for me to remember what keybind I need to press, as it acts as a visual aid. The second reason is so I can job switch without any real issue or change to the layout. So I have my health and resource bar dead center just above the hotbars, as I tend to spend a lot of time looking at the hotbars and my cooldowns, and I want to see my HP and resources without actually trying to see it, with my job gauges and bars centered around the health as well for the exact same reason. And I have it the exact same for every job, so I don't have to adapt my vision or change my focus habits. Now, as I said previously, I spend the majority of my time looking at my hotbar, which means I have moved my target bar to match that, moving it down to just above the job gauges I have placed above my health bars, as the default position is way too far away up the screen to focus on. If you go to the bar settings for the enemy target bar, you'll notice you can display target info independently. When you have this setting on, you can move the target's health, cast bar and status buffs and debuffs separately, which I've done, so I can move the buffs and cast bar to be easier to see. I have also enlarged the target's cast bar to see it even clearer, as the target cast bar can be very important for fight mechanics, so I want to be able to see it very clearly. I have also put the focus target bar just under the target bar as well, and enlarged it, just so when I'm healing but doing DPS, I can keep an eye on a tank a bit better. Or I happen to be DPSing a target but need to keep an eye on another enemy target. Speaking of cast bars, I have my own cast bar just above the target HP, as it's as important, so I can visually see my cast timer for using spells, and it's basically just on my character, so it's hard to miss and it's easy to read. The same is said for my debuffs, which I have moved slightly off from my cast bar and enlarged the frame size by a large portion. With debuffs that can insta-kill or influence fight mechanics, I want these big and noticeable like warning lights, and this is why I don't have to look for the debuffs. They will basically make themselves known. Enhancements on the other hand aren't as important, so I have them roughly default size, same layout as my hotbars, and I just have them next to my hotbars, as it's nice and close to my hotbar, so a little easier to keep up with important buffs such as damage mitigation or burst phases even. The others category for buffs on the other hand is very unimportant. This is for food buffs, FC buffs and the like, so I have it under my hotbar as I don't need to be watching them all the time, and I have it placed right next to my main menu frame, as we don't need the main menu in our line of vision at all times, if even at all, so I've centered it at the bottom of my screen out of the way. Now, we also have the pet hotbar. It's not overly important, but it can be handy for ordering your pet to either follow or stop attacking, so I have it quite small, and I've put it above my shared hotbars. The shared smaller hotbars you see just under the pet hotbars are hidden, but I do use them. Again, that'll be at the end for collapsing hotbars. I also have my notification frame a little off to the right of everything, as it just shows loot drops and stuff, and it doesn't need to be anywhere in particular. Same goes for item help and action help. These are just your tooltips. I have mine slightly away from my hotbars, just so they don't cover anything if I hover over a skill or something. Finally, the party list. I have moved this down the screen a bit and nudged it a tiny bit towards my hotbars, just so I can keep up with the party, for healing and other such things. And I have to put the enemy list right next to it for tanking and such. They're not overly taking up my screen, but near enough that a quick glance has me covered. I have made my limit gauge as small as possible and put it right above the party list, and put my alliance lists right above that as well, and made them tiny. This is just so I can have all my party and raid info in one place, so my eyes aren't darting around looking for separate portions of info that could be important at one point or another, so I have them all grouped together to make them easier to find. And lastly, the collapsing hotbar. If anything, it was a bit of a tease for people who don't know what it is, but it's just a macro. Now, there is a lot more to this and a lot you can do with it, such as copying hotbars from certain jobs to create job bars and raid bars, or just hotbars full of things you could have handily on a hotbar rather than menu searching for things you wouldn't be using all that often. But that is a whole video in itself that I'll do in the future. But back to the actual collapsing part, it is just a macro that goes as follows. Go to the user macros in your system menu, go to the share tab, click on an empty slot to make a macro, and type /hotbar space display space followed by the hotbar number you want to open or hide, such as hotbar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7, space open square bracket on /off and close square bracket. This will turn a hotbar off or on when you press it. You can also then type /wait, a number which will be counted in seconds. For my example, I use 7, so 7 seconds. So /wait space 7. And under it, /hotbar space display and the hotbar number, just like you did in the first line of text. But use the same hotbar number you were turning on or off. This will hide the hotbar after a certain amount of seconds after you've opened it, or it'll automatically hide it for you. I have the example macro on screen so you can just copy it, but just remember that you are using the hotbar number for the hotbar you want to hide or show. Anyway, that's all for this guide or tutorial. Not sure it was that much of a guide, but I hope it gave you a few ideas how to tackle your own UI or ways to improve, or maybe I showed you how not to do it. Who knows? And also do let me know if you would like a guide on macros or how to create job bars and such, or if you just want extra hotbars in general, let me know in the comments, or praise me for the guide or berate me, depending how you think I did or if I helped you or not. And while you're down there, why not like and subscribe? You're already down there, so why not? Thanks for watching, guys. I do hope I helped you out in one way or another. If you have a hankering for more MMO content, you can find me over at Twitch at twitch.tv/dyinglegacy. We do MMOs and things there. But anyway, have a good one, guys. Take care of yourselves and stay awesome.